This daf is sponsored by Sean Kashani. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amud or daf, please see the description box below. We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 37b. On the previous Amud, Rabbi Yishmael said that anytime it says Moshav, what it means is that the mitzvah applies after Yerusha and Yeshiva, but the mitzvah only applies in Eretz Yisrael. It does not apply outside of Eretz Yisrael. And so the Gemara now asks, when it comes to Nesachim, which is what Rabbi Yishmael is talking about, as we explained on the previous Amud, Bia Moshav Ksiv Bahu. It doesn't just say the word Moshav, it says the word Bia as well, and so therefore that's why maybe only over there we say it applies only in Eretz Yisrael, because both terms are actually used. Rashi says, Bia Moshav Ksiv Bahu, it says Bia and Moshav. Vehechi Yolif Minei. So how does Rabbi Yishmael learn from there, Moshav below Bia, that anytime it says Moshav without the word Bia, that applies only in Eretz Yisrael, and it means to say after Yerusha and Yeshiva. Dil Mahaidim Efarish Bei Bias Haaretz, maybe only in this case where it actually says explicitly coming into the land, Hu Delo Boy Lamemar Kol Makam Shatem Yoshvim. And that's where we say it doesn't apply anywhere where you dwell. Aval Moshav below Bia, but if you'd have an example of a mitzvah where it said Moshav and it didn't mention coming into the land, Ei Malach Afilu Chutz La'aretz, then I could say to you it applies even in Chutz La'aretz. What's Rabbi Yishmael's proof that when it says Moshav it only applies in Eretz Yisrael? Maybe that's only over here where it also has the language of Bia. And the Gemara says, Hachi Kamar, this is what Rabbi Yishmael was saying, L'lamid shekol makom shenemar Bia Moshav. He actually does mean to say that this teaches us that anytime it says Bia and Moshav, Eino elo la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva, that's only after inheriting and settling the land. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. And Rashi says, Hachi Kamar Rabbi Yishmael, this is what Rabbi Yishmael is saying, Shekol makom shenemar Bia Moshav, anytime it says Bia Moshav, it means only in Eretz Yisrael after settling the land. The Chodosh Asar Rabbi Yishmael Lashmin, and by Chodosh, Rabbi Yishmael is coming and saying, Tichsib Beinami Bias Haaretz Moshavos. There also, it says Bias Haaretz and it says Moshavos, and again, that's only going to be in Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara continues, Ihachi, if so, if that is the case, Amar lo Rabbi Akiva. So what's the response over there? Rabbi Akiva responds to Rabbi Yishmael in the Braisa. It says, Rabbi Yishmael says to him, Hare Shabbos shenemar bo Moshavos. What about Shabbos? There it says the word Moshavos, and there it doesn't only apply in Eretz Yisrael, it applies in Chutz La'aretz as well. V'yamar le Shabbos kal v'chomer he. And then Rabbi Yishmael says back to Rabbi Akiva, by Shabbos we have a kal v'chomer. That's why it applies everywhere. And so the Gemara says, but if Rabbi Yishmael was only talking about Bio Moshav, he could have responded differently. Namely, what he could have said to him was as follows. Ano Bia Moshav Ka'amina. I'm talking about examples where it says Bia and Moshav. By Shabbos it only says Moshav, and that's why it applies everywhere. That's what Rabbi Yishmael should have responded to Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara says, Chadav Yod Ka'amarle. The Gemara says, actually, Rabbi Yishmael was responding to Rabbi Akiva with one argument, but he did have a further argument. Chada number one, Da'ana Bia Moshav Ka'amina. I'm only talking about examples of Bia and Moshav. You can't bring a proof from Shabbos where it only says Moshavos. V'yod, and further, the Ka'amar Tarei Shabbos, Shenemar and Bo Moshavos. You're arguing that by Shabbos it says Moshavos and it applies everywhere. Shabbos Kal V'chomer. By Shabbos we have a Kal V'chomer. That's why Shabbos is different. And the Gemara continues, B'mai Komiflagi, what exactly are Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva arguing about with regards to Nesachim? And the Gemara explains, as we said on the previous Amud, B'kirvu Nesachim b'midbar Komiflagi. They're arguing about whether they brought Nesachim in the midbar. Did the mitzvah of Nesachim apply? Rabbi Yishmael Savar lo Kirvu Nesachim b'midbar. Rabbi Yishmael holds that they did not bring Nesachim in the midbar because he holds the mitzvah of Nesachim again is only in Eretz Yisrael after Yerusha and Yeshiva. Rabbi Yishmael is talking specifically about Bamas Tzibor, about a Bama that is for the public. Rabbi Akiva Savar, and Rabbi Akiva holds Kirvu Nesachim b'midbar. They did bring Nesachim in the midbar, meaning to say Rabbi Akiva holds the mitzvah applies even outside of Eretz Yisrael, and it applies, as we said on the previous Amud, even by a Bamas Yochid, even by an individual's Bama. And Rashi explains, B'mai Komiflagi, what are they arguing about? Maror Rabbi Akiva shelo lomad Rabbi Yishmael. What did Rabbi Akiva, why did he see fit not to learn like Rabbi Yishmael? To Kevan dechsev Bia Moshav ba'aretz kamar lachar Yerusha v'yeshiva. If it says Bia and Moshav over there by Nesachim, doesn't it mean like Rabbi Yishmael says? It means after Yerusha and Yeshiva, only in Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara then explained, Rabbi Yishmael savar lo kirvu Nesachim b'midbar. Rabbi Yishmael holds they didn't bring Nesachim in the midbar. V'afagav dechsev b'miluim v'zeh asher tasal hamizbeach uksiv bei nesachim be'olas hatamid bekorban sibur hu dehaben. Now, even though it does say that you're going to have nesachim over there, that was talking about the olas hatamid, that was talking about the daily korban ola by the korban sibur. But the point of Rabbi Yishmael is aval hayechidim, but the individuals lo neschayvu b'nesachim, they were only chayiv b'nesachim ela mibias haaretz ve'elach la'achar yerusha v'yeshiva. The individuals were only chayiv b'nesachim once they actually came into Eretz Yisrael after Yerusha and Yeshiva, as we explained. Rabbi Akiva savar kirvu nesachim, but Rabbi Akiva holds they did bring nesachim in the midbar, even liyachid b'midbar. Even again, as we said, for an individual in the midbar, they would also bring nesachim mishakirvu l'rabbim, from the point in time that the rabbin brought, so to the yachid. Hilkach al karchach ila hatina nesachim lebama gedola lo itzrich. Now, therefore, if the pasuk that we're talking about over here was talking about nesachim for bama gedola, that you don't need a pasuk. Shekvartuna v'omedes, that already was a requirement. Ubio ha'amura kan lo huskra. So why does it say bia over here? That's mentioned elam mipnei bamas yachid. That's talking about bamas yachid. It's talking about the individual bamas. Shehutra bebiyasan legilgul kol yudal lechana. That was allowed when they entered Eretz Yisrael, when they were in Gilgal for the first 14 years. Ubaha kosav latinam nesachim. The pasuk is coming again, according to Rabbi Akiva, as we said, to explain that even a bamas yachid that requires nesachim. And the Gemara continues. Amar Abaye says, Haitana devei Rabbi Yishmael mapik meidoch Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael. This Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael is different from the other Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael that we're about to quote. The Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael, because it was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. Hoel v'nemru bios b'Torah stam. Since in general it says bia, it says coming into the land of Eretz Yisrael in the Torah. Uparad loch hakasav be'echad mehen. But in one of them, the pasuk specifies and says la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva. It says that we're talking specifically after Yerusha and Yeshiva, after conquering the land. Afkol, so too, any time it says bia in the Torah, la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva, it refers to after inheriting and settling the land. And so you see from this Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael that just the word bia alone means la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva. And in the previous opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, we said that you have to have the word bia together with the word moshav to mean la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva. And the Gemara continues v'idach. Now the other opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, misham dehavim melech ubikurim shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad. We can't learn from that case of melech. Again, that specific case where it says la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva is by the case of melech, as we'll see in Rashi in a moment. But the other sheet of Rabbi Yishmael says it's not just by melech; it's by bikurim as well. That's shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad. That's two psukim that are coming to teach the same thing. V'chol shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad ein melamdin. And again, as we've said the rule earlier, anytime you have two psukim teaching the same thing, you can't learn to other cases. It applies only in those cases and in no other cases. And so that's the dispute within what exactly Rabbi Yishmael held. Did Rabbi Yishmael say that because by melech it specifies la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva, so therefore anytime it says just the term bia alone, it means la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva? Or no, we can't learn from melech because it's by melech and bikurim. That's the first sheet that we had within Rabbi Yishmael, and therefore that first sheet of Rabbi Yishmael says it has to say not only a language of bia, but a language of moshav as well. Only in those situations do we say that it means la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva. And Rashi explains, Haitana devei Rabbi Yishmael de la'el de lesla Yerusha v'yeshiva elahecha dechsiv moshav im bia. The earlier version of Rabbi Yishmael was that Yerusha Yeshiva, that when do we say that the pasuk means Yerusha and Yeshiva? That's if it has both terms. If it has the term moshav and bia, mapik me'idach tana. That's different than the other version of Rabbi Yishmael. Motz midaito shel tana acher da'afilu lochsev ela bia. Because in the second version of Rabbi Yishmael, even just the term bia lechuda, even just the term bia alone, eino ela lachar Yerusha v'yeshiva. That means after Yerusha and Yeshiva. And again, in that second version of Rabbi Yishmael, luparat lach ba'achas mehen, in one of the examples, the pasuk specifies la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva. That's gabe melech. That's by the mitzvah of appointing a king. Ksiv kisavo el haaretz. It says when you come to the land, the language of bia. And then it also says v'yerishta v'yashavta ba. It talks about conquering the land. V'yamarta asim alai melech. And you're going to say to make a king. That's the mitzvah of appointing a melech. And we learn in the second version of Rabbi Yishmael, we learn from there that all cases where it uses the language of kisavo or the language of bia coming to the land, it means la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva. Ubikurim, but the first version of Rabbi Yishmael says, no, you can't learn from melech because it does the same thing by bikurim. It's shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad. What does it say by bikurim? It says v'haya kisavo el haaretz. It says when you come to the land, and the parish banami Yerusha v'yeshiva. Over there also, it says Yerusha and Yeshiva, and again, you can't learn from shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad. V'idach, now the other version of Rabbi Yishmael that says you could learn from melech, and it's not a problem of shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad. That's the second version of Rabbi Yishmael. So tzrichi, we actually do need need both by Melech and by Bikurim. The rule again is that if both cases are necessary, you couldn't learn one from the other. It's no longer Shnei Ksuvim Haboim Kechad, and now you can learn out to all other cases. Why do we need them both? Because of Rachman and Melech, because if it only wrote it by Melech, v'lo kasa Bikurim, it wouldn't write it by Bikurim. So Hava Aminas, I would have thought Bikurim to Kamesani La'alter. Bikurim, where you're getting Hana, you're benefiting right away. That's something that happens immediately. Right when you get to the land, you can benefit from Bikurim. So I might have thought Bikurim is different. Bikurim is not the same as Melech. Maybe you don't have to wait La'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva. V'ikasa Bikurim, and if it only wrote by Bikurim La'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva, v'lo kasa Melech, it didn't say that by Melech. Hav Amina. So then I would have thought the other direction. Melech, the darko l'chavish la'alter. By a Melech, the way is that the conquering is immediate, and so therefore, since the conquering is immediate, so therefore maybe that's not La'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva. So that's why we need to have both cases written in the pasuk. The Idach and the other version of Rabbi Yishmael that says, no, you can't learn because it's Shnei Ksuvim Haboim Kechad. It's not true. You don't need both cases. Nichtov Rachman Melech. The pasuk could have just written La'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva by Melech. V'lo by Bikurim. You wouldn't need to write it by Bikurim. It's obvious. V'ano Amin. I would have said as follows: Uma Melech de l'chabesh La'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva. If by a king who is his way is to conquer, but the mitzvah is only La'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva, Bikurim lo kol shekain. So by Bikurim, isn't that true? Isn't it obvious that it's only Le'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva? V'idach, and the other one will respond to that. Ikasav hachi. If it would have written it in that fashion, Hava Aminas, I would have said as follows: Midi dehave achala. We find an example by chala. Chala is something that certainly the chiyuv was immediate, and so therefore over here as well, maybe it would be immediate. Kamash molon, and so that's why the pasuk has to teach us. That's why it has to write it specifically by Bikurim to say that the obligation is not immediate. And Rashi explains, Melech the darko lichbosh yasimu aleim la'alter. Again, a king whose way is to conquer, that should be a mitzvah immediately. V'yotzel lefneim, he should go out in front of them and conquer. And the other one said, Midi dehave achala. You would have thought maybe Bikurim is immediate like chala. The hakol modim sheneschayvu b'miyad. Everybody agrees the mitzvah of chala is immediate. T'chsiv bevoachem, there it says bevoachem. V'tanya, we learned in a brayso, mishuna bia zu mikol bia shebetorah. This term bia is different than the other ones in the Torah. Shenemar behen ki yaviyacha, ki savo, v'kan nemar bevoachem. Usually it uses terms like ki yaviyacha or ki savo. Here it says bevoachem. Mikevon shebo neschayvu. We learn out from the moment that they enter the land, there's a chiyuv by chala. You would have thought that possibly by Bikurim as well, and that's why it needs to write by Bikurim that it's La'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva. And the Gemara continues, V'hashta de'amrit chovas haguf noheges bein be'eretz Yisrael bein b'chutz la'aretz. Now that you're saying that an obligation upon the body applies both in Eretz Yisrael and in chutz la'aretz, Moshav the kasav rachmana gabe Shabbos lamali. What do we need the pasuk to say the word Moshav by Shabbos? Again, the word Moshav is saying that it applies everywhere, but it applies everywhere anyhow because it's a chovas haguf. And the Gemara says, Itzrich, it is necessary for the pasuk to say Moshav, because I might have thought, since Shabbos is written by the other holidays, Tiboy Kiddush Kimoados, I might think that it requires sanctification like the holidays. Kamash Molon, and so therefore that's what the pasuk is saying, Moshav, that by Shabbos you don't require that sanctification. Rashi explains, Tiboy Kiddush Bezdin, meaning you might think that it requires sanctification in Bezdin. We need the Bezdin has to sanctify. The Bezdin Agadol has to sanctify the new month, and that's how we establish the holidays. Maybe that's true by Shabbos as well. You have to sanctify the week. I might have thought that V'lo noi Kiddush ala b'Yehuda. Now the sanctification can only happen in the territory of Yehuda. It only happens by the Beis Hamikdash. Kedamar b'Sanhedrin called Rishos Shatadoresh Yu b'Shichno Shel Mokom, like we say in Sanhedrin. It has to be by the area of the dwelling place of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so therefore I might have thought that it requires Kiddush, and that's why it says Moshav. The word Moshav says no. It applies everywhere. Shabbos applies in all places, and therefore you don't require the Kiddush Bezin, which would have required a particular location. And the Gemara continues along the same lines, Moshe v'dekazav rachmana gabe chelav and dam lomali. What do we need the pasuk to say the word Moshe by chelav and dam? Those are also chovas haguf. It's obvious they apply everywhere. And the Gemara says to that, Itzrich, it is necessary, because I might have thought, Ho'elu v'nyana de karbonos ksivi, since chelav and dam are written by other karbonos, I might have thought, bisman de karbon nitzar chelav and dam, in a time when there are karbonos, when there is a Beis HaMikdash, only then chelav and dam are prohibited, bisman de leka carbon lo. Maybe I would think at a time where there is no carbon, there is no prohibition, kamash malon, and so that's why the pasuk says Moshav to say that it applies everywhere. It applies even when there's no Beis HaMikdash. Moshav the kasav rachmana gabi matzah umoror lamali. Why does the pasuk need to say Moshav by matzah and moror? Again, that's a chovas haguf. It should be obvious that they apply even outside of Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara says, it's necessary to have the word Moshav, because I might have thought, since it says you're going to eat the Korban Pesach on matzah and morer, so I might have thought, Bisman Dika Pesach in, Bisman Deleko Pesach lo, at a time there's a Korban Pesach, maybe only then, yes, there's a mitzvah matzah and morer, but otherwise there is none. Kamash Malan, that's what the Pasuk says, that the mitzvah matzah and morer applies, even if there's no Korban Pesach. And the Gemara continues, Bia, the Kosav Rachmana Gabe Tfilin, Peter Chamor Lamali. Why does it have to say the word Bia by Tfilin and by Peter Chamor, by the redemption of the firstborn donkey? Those also are Chovas Haguf. It's obvious that they apply even outside of Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara says to that, that's necessary for the teaching of the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael as follows. It means to say, Asei mitzvah zu, you should do this mitzvah, shebeshvila tikones la'aretz, because of this mitzvah, you're going to be able to enter into the land. Meaning to say that the pasuk does not mean to say that these mitzvahs only apply when you enter the land, they only apply in Eretz Yisrael. That's not the case, they apply everywhere. But what the pasuk means to say is that it's because of the performance of this mitzvah. That refers to the idea of the sanctification of the Bechor, that's Peter Chamor. It's because of the performance of this mitzvah that you will merit to enter Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara continues, Moshav kol makom shatem yoshvim mashma. It makes sense according to the one who says that the word Moshav means anywhere where you dwell, meaning even outside of Eretz Yisrael. That's what the word Moshav refers to. So it makes sense when they entered Eretz Yisrael, it says that they waited for the Chadash, they waited for after Pesach. In other words, the mitzvah of Chadash applies. They could not have the Chadash, they could not have the new grain before they brought the Omer. They ate only after Pesach, after the day after Pesach. They did not eat before that because the mitzvah applied immediately, meaning to say the word, when it uses the term Moshav, it does not mean that you have to wait until after Yerusha v'Yeshiva, but immediately upon entering Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah of Chadash applies. Alma, so we see again, that makes sense according to that Mando Amar. And Rashi explains, the point over here is, according to the Mandamar, that Moshav means in all locations. And when it says Moshav by Chadash, Lav Yerusha v'Yeshiva Asa, that does not refer to the fact that you have to wait until after conquering the land for the mitzvah of Chadash to apply. Hainu v'chulu, so that's why it makes sense that they applied the mitzvah immediately upon entering Eretz Yisrael. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph.